for us to increase our manufacturing, indeed, energy and manufacturing are what we call Siamese twins. And each has a direct effect on the other. I was speaking with my colleague there, Juma Mukwana, and he was telling me that there are several industries that he knows, SMEs, that have closed down because of price of power. It is true. We have two issues that are in regard to power. Number one is the costs. Number two, and the costs is on areas probably around Nairobi and Kiambu. Why? Because we have invested a lot of infrastructure in evacuating power from Olkaria, from Lake Turkana, from the hydros, and all that power, most of it is delivered in Nairobi and the areas around Nairobi. And so therefore the manufacturers around Nairobi, the issue of reliability is not there. When now you go to coasts and you go to Western, because we still have a lot to invest in terms of the infrastructure, then now the issues of the manufacturers there, the issue of cost now becomes a second option. The issue now becomes reliability. What are we doing towards the two issues? Number one, let me speak to about reliability. I want to speak to the two main regions. We have done a 400 kV line from all the way from Suswa. Suswa is our main substation, to Isinya. At Isinya, we detour to Tanzania, and we also detour to Konza at 400 kV, and we are pushing 400 kV down to Mariakani. Why are we doing so? Because you realize, and because I know I'm speaking to people who have toured this country, you realize that you will see thermal generators in coasts. You will also see them around at the river, and one in Thika, and one that will be commissioned in Western Kenya. Anywhere you see a thermal generator, it is an area where has issues on reliability of power. In that where we are generating our power from Olkaria, from the hydros, the power by the time it gets to Mombasa, it is at low voltage. And that is why now the issue of reliability at the coast region is very critical. So we are pushing that line, and we should be able to commission, God willing, the 400 kV substation in Mariakani by July. We are not stopping there. We are doing a 400 kV, 220 kV line from Mariakani to Dongokundu, so that Dongokundu can be able to now come up as an industrial zone. We are operating the line from Rabai all the way to Kilifi. Why? Because that area around Mukomani, Bomani, all the way to Kilifi has become the new industrial area around the coastal region. So I want to face Kenyans who are in the coastal region and tell you that probably by July again, we should commission the Rabai Kilifi line. And that will ensure that now you start speaking like the Nairobi team about the cost of power. Because now we'll have sorted out the issue of reliability. Again, the investors around Western Kenya. And in Western Kenya, we are not only talking about the investors. We are also talking to Kenyans who every other day, because we have a constrained transmission network between Narok and Bomet, where we don't have a transmission network. And for power to flow to West region, we only have one route between Olkaria to Lesos to Kisumu. And when we get to Kisumu, we go back to a place called, we call Muhoroni. Through a 132 kV line is a very small line that can only carry about 80 to 100 megawatts. The peak demand on that line alone moves to around 140 and 150. And it is one of the lines that has caused 2 or 3 national blackouts. Because as KPLC tries to ensure that the industries and the people around the South Rift region and Nyanza region are served with power, the line overloads, and once it trips, it causes a national blackout. So we are accelerating. We got funding from AFDB, and we are accelerating the construction of a double circuit line, 132 kV, between Narok and Bomet, to ensure that now power can be able to flow. Instead of flowing, some will flow through the normal route of Olkaria Lesos to Kisumu. And we also push power from Olkaria to Narok to Bomet to Sotik, all the way to South Nyanza. We are also doing a line completing, and this we should be able to complete by December, from Sondu to Awendo to Homa Bay. That will ensure now the area around West Kenya, including the fishing landing ports, the fish landing ports in Lake Victoria, have adequate supply of power. And so therefore now the issue of reliability again in West Kenya will be sorted. Then we come to the issue of the cost of power, because I said it is important that we speak to the two issues as different, because they are two different issues. Now the cost of power, ladies and gentlemen, and I agree with what Joe had spoken to. Joe had mentioned about the time of use tariff. We need to review. In this country, ladies and gentlemen, we have a peak demand of 2,185 megawatts. And that happens between, most of the time, between 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. But trust you me, between 10 p.m., now when the country goes to sleep, we have to vent geothermal power, because the country has gone to sleep. Some industries have gone to sleep, and so therefore the only power that we are utilizing is street lights and a few industries that are running, and probably your security lights. So the country's power demand drops all the way to about 1,100 megawatts. So we have about 1,000 megawatts that we need to utilize for us to aggressively lower what we call the weighted average of power. And that is why we are speaking, and we want to encourage investors and the industry to ensure that it uses the time of use tariff. We want you to increase your production and have a 24-hour economy, so that now you can be able to lower the cost of power. Let me also speak about what we call the redundancy. That is what we call N-1. It is good that we appreciate the kind of energy infrastructure that we do currently have. And I know most of you have traveled, and you will realize that when you travel, especially to the European countries, you will realize you will rarely see energy infrastructure overhead. Most of the energy infrastructure is underground. There is a lot of convenience and reliability when energy infrastructure is buried underground. Why? Because when you have heavy rains, trees fall. They fall on your 11 kV, your 6 kV, that like happened the other day when we had storms in Nairobi. We had a lot of areas that were affected by fallen trees. And so therefore, the long end of us is investing in energy infrastructure and now transferring what we have as overhead power lines and burying them underground. That way now we have less outages. But of course, that requires a lot of funding. In the meantime, what are we doing? In the next 2 or 3 years, because demand of power has grown, and there are some substations that we are seeing that are already overloaded, we are investing about 8.5 billion in Kenya Power alone in improving some substations to ensure that where that industry you are serving, that area that you are in, we ensure that you have what we call the security of supply. We are also investing through Ketraco another about 15 billion shillings to ensure that other than doing the Narok Bomet line, we are also doing Kabarnet Rumuruti, and we are doing Malindi Weru Kilifi. Those are lines that are just about to be advertised, so that we increase our evacuation and also supply to our load centers. Ladies and gentlemen, we do have a tariff on the 220 kV bandwidth. And so therefore what we are also urging is for the investors who are heavy consumers of power. For example, the steel factories. Instead of metering you at 132, let us meter you at 220. When we meter you at 220, you have two main advantages. Number one, you lower our system and transmission losses. And number two, most important, is that we are able to give you a tariff probably close to the 10 kilowatt hour, 10 shillings per kilowatt hour that Joe did speak to. And so therefore your cost of production is able to be lowered. What I want to urge you, ladies and gentlemen, and who are in this room, let us also appreciate that the power that we are experiencing right now and utilizing is backstopped by KPLC through the PPAs. And so therefore, we must be able to protect KPLC as much as possible, as much as we want to liberalize. Why am I saying so? I'm saying so because the power generators that we do have in this country, KenGen and the IPPs, KPLC must pay them promptly, including Ethiopian electrical power, because we are importing about 200 megawatts from Ethiopia. We are importing about 50 megawatts from Uganda. If KPLC does not honor its obligation and pay the producer, then the producer, what did the producer do? Shut the supply. And so therefore, the issue of connection and the costs we must look into and work towards lowering the transmission losses, so that as we lower the transmission losses, as the manufacturers increase the consumption, we can have a weighted lower average, and gradually, because the president has been speaking to this, gradually we anticipate that in the next pricing cycle that EPRA shall be able to do, we should be able to give you a price that should be better than the current price that you are having. And I hope the manufacturers will be able to. I do not want to predict and say it will be lower by this amount. But I want to assure you that we are working towards ensuring that once KPLC lowers its transmission and system losses and we increase our consumption of power, that way now we are going to see lowering of the weighted average cost, and that will transmit to lower bills for you. Most important is because we have a very good rainy season, our dams are full, therefore we are having less production of power from our thermal generators. Actually, as of today, we are doing about 5%. That also translates into lowering your cost of power. We have, as an industry, as a sector, we have decommissioned 2 thermal plants, Kipevu 1 and Kipevu 2. I'm not seeing a situation where we are going to probably renew their PPAs in the near future, not unless something drastic happens. And that also lowers into your cost of power. And we have also decommissioned the most expensive power plant, that is Muhoron gas turbine, that does produce power at about 70 cents, US cents, no, 70 shillings per kilowatt hour. And so therefore all those issues are speaking into lowering the cost of power.